Hello, property chicks. Welcome to our podcast for today. We're discussing how to find a property. So, whether you're a first time buyer or it's your fourth house or you're trying to do a development site, these are tools that you can use to do anything you've got to do with buying a property. So, welcome to my lovely co host, Rachel Hambling, who will be going through some of the stuff today. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you, Karen. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all well on this very overcast, cloudy Brisbane day.
It is.
Yeah, getting a little bit
Yes.
cooler we are here, Karen.
I know. I had a jumper on just before, but it's quickly come off. So,
Yeah.
thanks for everyone for
Oh,
joining us. And people who've sent through emails and questions to us, they are being answered. So anyway, right. Well, as I
awesome.
said, we're going through different searches. That's what she does for a living, is find property. That's what I do as part of the business, is search for properties. And these are the most basic things we do, whether we're buying our own home or we're buying a development site. These are the most, not the most, but these are the tools that we use to do any of those sort of things. So I'm going to hand over to Rachel, who's going to start off with this. All right, all yours,
Awesome.
Rachel.
Thanks, Karen. Yes, it's a really important part of the process to do your due diligence. And these are just some of the basic things that we do when we initially get a property and we're going to start to look at it or research it. And these are just some of the tools you can use that are free and that will help you to check some of the overlays and different outlines of the property, just to help you make those first initial decisions to know whether or not it's worth going forward. So what we're going to do is, I've got two properties to look at today. We're going to start with the council interactive map. So I'm just going to flick over to my shared screen. Can you see that there, Karen?
Yes, we're up.
Yep. Okay. Awesome. Okay. So this is the council website that everybody can get access to. It's a great tool. It's relatively simple to use, and it's a great way to look for just a few basic details around your property. So we're going to start in the interactive mapping section. And this is where we would search for property. So the first property I'm going to look at is actually in Brighton on High Street. And then we just bring up the number, and it's going to bring up the outline of this property. And this property shows me, if you might not be able to see it on the screen there, but it's got a very faint line in between this property, which shows me that it's a double title. So it's what we call here in Brisbane a splitter block. So some of the things I would do just to look, when I'm just starting to look at it, I'm going to go and have a look at the contours. So I want to see how flat the site is, or how, if it's got any slope to it. So this site does have a little bit of slope. I've actually checked the 1 metre contour. So as you can see there, from the middle of the property to the rear, it slopes about 2 metres. Those black lines are giving you an indication of 1 metre in length, approximately, of what it slopes. So it's not major, but it is something to definitely take into consideration when you're thinking about services, stormwater, sewer, those sorts of things. So that would be my first
The more
check.
squiggly lines, the more you need to be concerned.
Concerned, correct. Yes. So this is not too bad, but it's definitely something we consider. So then I would also look at the aerial view of the property. Now, anything within Brisbane City Council could have a character overlay on it. So I like to just check the 1946 view. As you can see there, there's no house that was on the property in 1946, which means whatever is on the property now could be removed if that was what you wanted to do. So I now look at what it looks like now, and as you can see, there was a house there on if you're facing the street, on the right-hand side. And at the moment, this site actually has just all been demolished, and we'll be following this process as we go along together in this program. So what I would also then do is I'd go to the zoning, and I would check what zone the site would be. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can do this. Obviously, just bring up the colour and the legend, and that legend will tell you what it is, and it pretty much matches the low density residential. So I know in that zone I can do new homes. So I could build 2 new homes on this block by removing the existing house. The other thing I could do is, if I didn't bring up the colours, is I can actually go here up to the property button and double click on this site. Hopefully it's going to work for us today. Might be a bit slow, but this, if you do this process, this will bring up a property report for you, which will tell you what the zoning is. So we might just skip that one because the computer's a bit delayed.
People might think, well, I'm not developing, what do I care about that? But you might be buying that house and that block might be low density, but next door to it might be medium pink colour, which means they can build units and they can build townhouses on it. And you can guarantee the next time that block next door gets sold, somebody's going to buy it and put houses, and not houses, they'll put units and townhouses on it. So even if you don't plan to develop, you just want to buy your own house, it's always good to know what the zoning is next door.
Yes.
It could be industrial, it could be medium or high density, which is an 8-story plus high rise. So it's good to know what, not only your zoning, but what your neighbours are getting.
Yeah, that's a great tip, Karen. Excellent tip. Okay, so some of the other things I'd look at from this point forward would be just a couple of our typical overlays. And the overlays are conditions that the council have put on to the land based on topography, flooding, just the region, bushfire, all those sorts of things. So I'm just going to go through a few koalas, correct? I'm just going to go through a few of the basic ones. So we've got biodiversity here, and biodiversity has got to do with trees and koalas and habitat, those sorts of things. And here you can see the property doesn't actually have any overlay, but it does have some overlay behind it, which is acknowledged here as high ecological significance. Now, whether or not that had anything to do with building a house, I don't think so, but it's just something to be aware of when you're either purchasing for development especially. I usually check bushfire, which is the next one. No, we've got no bushfire overlay. I know that the house is not pre-1946, but if I was concerned, I would check the dwelling house character. It also shows me that in this area it has got that overlay, so there might be some restrictions around your facades and how you build your homes, so that's something to double check. And then I would check the flooding. So we've got 3 levels of flooding here. We've got Brisbane river flooding, creek and waterway flooding, and overland flow. So let's just have a look and see what this brings up. Okay, so there's no Brisbane river flooding. We're quite away in Brighton from the Brisbane River. Oh, here we go. So we've got some creek and waterway. So this is obviously flooding at the end of the block, which would limit your building envelope possibly, and also would affect your storm water. So that would be something that you would need to consider. And let's check to see if there's any overland flow. Oh, and no overland flow. So the overland flow and obviously the creek waterway in the outer areas are the most important to look for, especially if you were completely flooded. That would really affect your building envelope and what you built there. One of the other things I also check is significant landscape trees, because this might tell me if there are any protected trees on the property. It's not showing that there is. So, but if something does show up, there could be something significant that you wouldn't be able to remove that would also hinder you building a home on that house or where you built the house. So that's also really important to consider. Okay, so how are we going there, Karen, for time? Awesome.
Yeah, no, that was good.
All right, so that would be, that would sort of be the basic things that I would start off looking at on the council website, and anyone can do that. It's free access, and it's a great way to really get yourself familiar with the overlays and how to start looking at the properties that you're inquiring about.
Because you might be a homeowner who just wants to build a new house, but as you said, if there's a creek down the back and there's a koala with a tree with a koala in it, and something else, then council's not going to let you build maybe even bigger than what is existing there, which could be an old miner's cottage, which will be quite small. So it
Yeah.
is quite important, even just a homeowner, to know
Yes.
what's on the
Yeah.
block
Absolutely. Because
and
I
what's
mean, if
around
you,
you, what's next
yeah,
door, what's
yeah,
going to be
yeah,
next door.
yeah. Because you
Yes,
might want to put a pool in the backyard, and maybe that
yeah.
flooding would affect a pool that you were putting in there. So yeah, definitely a really basic way to just look at your properties to see what your next step is. So one of the other
And
things that
it
is,
can affect insurance if you've got any water overlay on your land. I looked at a block once and I'm
yes,
like, there's no way this is flooding. Half the town will flood, but it had, someone suspected at some point it might come up halfway
yes,
up the backyard. The insurance was phenomenal. I'm like, the house is fine though, but the
yeah,
backyard flooded. And yeah,
yes.
I couldn't get
Good thing
insurance
to
on it. So I'm
note.
like,
Yeah,
walk away.
absolutely.
Yes.
So one of the other things I just wanted to quickly go through before I hand over to you is I wanted to just let people know about this other service. It's called Dial Before You Dig. Look, a lot of people would have heard of this before. It's free to register, and basically you can order a report on any property that you're looking at that will allow you to see where all the services are. So when you're looking at a property, even if it's your own home, you want to know where the water is. You want to know where the sewer, if there's a manhole or, in the back of your property that's going to hinder you building there possibly, or putting in a pool. So this is a fantastic service that provides you with just those basic details. You can do a new inquiry. I'll just run through that quickly, Karen, if you
Yep.
like. We just basically say we're going to do this for excavation, and then for subdivision. I'm just going to put some sort of pretend dates in here. It's just really giving an indication. We're working on a private property for private access. Then we go next, and then you're going to search for the address of the property. And it should automatically come up. I'll just give that a click. No, that didn't come up. Let's see if I can. 103A. No. I might just try another number in the street that I know is existing. Oh, unfortunately. Okay, well, for some reason it's not bringing it up. That's very bizarre. I'll just take that around way. Oh, here we go. Oh, no. See if I can type Brighton in. No, it's not coming up. Anyway, that's all right. It's a very
Yep.
easy service, and you just continue going through that process and submit, and then it will send you via your email all the reports you need to have a look at and be aware of. So it's a wonderful service.
Very good.
Awesome.
Right.
All right. So, Karen, did you want to talk about a property on the Sunshine
Yeah.
Coast?
Yeah. Well, so what Rachel's done there with Brisbane City Council, for most of the councils I've ever looked up in Queensland, Sunny Coast, Gold Coast, Ipswich, Logan, Moreton Bay, all the areas, Townsville, I think I've looked up, and Cairns, they all have this similar sort of setup on their site that you can freely access everything. You can look around and see what development approvals have been done within your vicinity, so you know if someone's building a massive warehouse or a shopping centre or something down the road. Just lets you know what is happening and what people, you might have a 50 unit development or 150 townhouses 3 doors down it's nothing there now, it's just a house, but that's what's been approved, so it lets you know all that stuff. New South Wales has an all-inclusive for the entire state of New South Wales. It has a one website, so I don't find it as wonderful, but maybe because I've not used it, maybe because I've not used it as much. So let's just bring my screen up. Okay, so I'm typing in at the moment. You do have to type in most of the address because it's not covering just a shire, it's covering everything. Similar sort of setup. Once again, you've got your zoning down in New South Wales. It's R1s, R2s, R3s. It sounds like Star Wars, but that's what it is. And then you've got all these little sub things that, sorry, I can't read that far away, or come all down the side that you can click on. Now we know that it lets you know the height of the buildings you can have in that suburb. So it comes up, if you can read that, it has a little 9 there, so you're allowed 9 meters to a building height. It will tell you if it's heritage listed. You've got the colouring. This is the big one you generally want to know, is what is the land zoning. And it's coming up over here saying R2. And if you don't know your R2s, you've got to go look it up. But R2 is what we would call medium density throughout most of Queensland. You could build a duplex, maybe 3 townhouses, maybe 4 units. So that's what that is down in New South Wales. So I'll take that colour off, and then you can work your way through all same as what Rachel did before. Now the one has it's a very good heading to have. This is your hazards. So once again, is it subject to bushfire? No, but as you can see, whatever this is. Flood, always my favourite one to check. No flooding anywhere. I did finally go miles to the north and find somewhere that did flood, but no flooding. Landslide, you'll generally only get that if you've built a sloping block, but once again, nothing's come up for landslide. And you can also click over here for, hold on, generating a report. Sorry, I got my glasses on. I can't see that far away. So then it will come up and present you with all those listings of stuff, and then 20 plans it all falls under on a report that you can have. So that's New South Wales. Once again, it's free. Easily look it up. We'll come off that one. Now, this is Sunshine Coast. Very good website, maybe because I use it all the time. So what I've done is I've just put in an address, and you can see it there, and you get to see very quickly what's all around it. So it's a big green space behind it. You probably can't see, but that's a little blue squiggly line. That to me has alarm bells. Now you've got details you can go into, and just gives you basic details on the property and the zoning. But if I click on a site report, this gives me everything. It gives me from where your water access is, the size of the property, and you can see there from the picture, like spot the house. The house is actually there. It's a thick bush, so good luck getting permission to clear that. And you can see it has a slight fall, and that is the highest point of the block, so that's where the house is. So it's got water along the front. That's what all these little lines are, your water, your manholes, your sewerage. So you can see that your block has these, especially if you're developing, if the water ends at the end of the road and you've got to bring it all the way up the road to your development site, it's costs. Okay, so this is where any lodgings have been done. So if somebody has taken out a development approval to put this into 16 lots, that's going to come up here, and you can click on that and actually go in and view all the documents that get lodged with council regarding that. So if you're buying a development site and you actually want to know what they've applied for and if they've got permission, then you've got all that access for free. Or if you just want to know what your neighbours are doing, you can also check it out.
Spying on them.
So this is always the one we want to double check, is rural residential, which up here means minimum 6,000 square metres, and all the neighbours were as well. This is the other one we want to look at, flooding and bushfire. We don't need to see that one. Okay, so this is your zoning, all the lovely colour coordinates. So all this on this side of the road is rural res. And when I bring up the water map, you'll see why, because you can't subdivide and put anything else on it. Over here is limited development. So it's either sports fields or it's not. It's too steep and you can't build anything on it. But they have got little housing estates over here because this side of the road doesn't flood. We don't need to know
It's always
local
great to
area.
look at a bit of an aerial view too, isn't it, Karen? Because it
It
does,
is.
sometimes it can give you a really good indication just about what's going on in the area.
Well, that's the
And
saying, even if you're not developing, like, let's see, because if that was all industrial zoning,
yes,
might be nothing there now,
mm,
or it could be commercial zoning. You could end up with a service station across the road,
yeah,
which we've just got one being built not far from here, near houses,
yeah,
shopping centres, whatever. So this way you get a good idea on what's. So no one will ever be able to develop the yellow parts. Obviously, if
mm-hmm,
they're sloping or there's a creek through it or something, but you can't develop those. So you know there you've got no development in front, and that's park and a creek ways behind in the green. So you're not going to have any neighbours behind or in front.
mm,
So it's a good thing to see what the whole
yeah.
neighbourhood is. That's just sulphate. That's not much.
So it's a
We're not
very
in.
private
Oh, we're
rural
sort of in an
property that looks
airport.
perfect.
Yeah, we're in an airport zone. The only time that makes a big difference is if you're, say, building in Morningside or Balmoral and you're right under a flight path, you may need to put extra noise. Your house will be noisy, but if you're building, you'll need to put extra noise protection in to your insulation and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Right, this is my favourite one here. So that's your biodiversity, and here's your waterways and wetlands. And this is
Very
why
obvious.
that was all yellow. And yes, that road does flood badly every time it rains heavy and all behind it. So as you can see, the only point that doesn't flood was that little top point where the house was. So if you were to buy that as a development, yes, it might be a couple of acres, but you got no chance of being able to do anything on that site. So that's a big one, especially if there's any creek, bambling little brook. You get 200-300 mils of rain in a few hours, and I can assure you it's not a bambling brook anymore. And then the
Yeah.
next one, this is your native vegetation. As we saw, it was heavily treed, that block. You have no chance of getting council to allow you to cut trees on that one. And
Yeah.
that was
They want to
bushfire. So
protect
where there's
some of
lots of
it.
trees, there's also bushfire. So if you decided to take the risk and go, hey, I think we should be able to, here's your flood hazard overlay. Like that's just, I love blue, but that's just too much blue for me. So, any of these issues, if you are developing, you've got to get a bushfire report. You've got to get an environmental report on the tree, and they just about name all the trees. You have to get a water report. And all these things require engineers who are
Yes.
specialists in that field. And so if you just look at that and go, no, get a boat, walk away,
Yeah.
just don't
Yeah.
do it. Excuse me. So that's Sunshine Coast. Once again, that's all free. It's all free access. There's your flood hazard. Once again, you that little white dots where the house is. Yeah, unless you plan to just live in a little house on a tiny little block and watch all the water and be waterfront property, I'd walk away
It's
from that
perfect.
one if you want to do anything else with it. So, but once again, that's just a free site that you can go on to. Of course, the first point of call when you're looking for, let me just get rid of that, for a site is realestate.com.au, especially in Queensland. We tend to not use Domain as much up here, but if I'm doing anything south of the border, I will always look up Domain. It doesn't seem to be the first point of call for most people. They will tend to list always on real estate, but I know down in Victoria they like Domain. You do both. And it's also a good way to freely get pricing. So Rachel's got an app that we pay for. She'll go through in a second, but you can just search all the properties in where were you? Brighton.
Brighton.
Yeah, a house on this size block of land with a pool and 3 bedrooms and 2 garages. And you can narrow all that down, which sometimes on these paid sites you actually can't narrow them down as much, and you can do keywords. So duplex is not a searchable criteria, but you can put it in your keyword searching. And that will bring up, and then you get an idea if you're looking at buying a duplex in Brighton, which is not what's being built, but you can see, you can see everything that's been sold, you can see everything that's currently for sale, and to see whether your property that you're looking at is comparable. Once you get to development sites, pricing gets a little bit weird because people usually want a lot of money for them if they're a development site. So, so yeah, that's often if I'm looking at a property going, is that cheap or is that expensive? I'll quickly do a further search on realestate.com and just to
Yeah.
see what everything else in that criteria that matches similar, what sort of pricing they're going for, whether it sits in the
Yeah.
middle or if it's like the most expensive duplex in Brighton. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's always
Do you have
good to
that
get
other screen?
comparators.
Yes,
Yes,
yeah.
I do. I'm going to bring up Price Finder
Okay.
at the moment. Let's just bring that up. Can you see that there, Karen?
Oh, sorry, wrong button.
That's all right. I'm just going to type in. So this is actually a paid
Yes.
service, and it's called Price Finder. And there's also other sites you can. There's RP Data, that's also a paid service, and it gives you access to property details around all the properties that are in Australia, basically. So I'm just going to have a look at Queensland. We're just going to look at the one across the road, obviously, that we were talking about. So you just type in the address and it will bring up the details, and we just click on that and it's going to give me the latest details. So one really good thing that Price Finder gives you here too, just up in the right-hand corner, is the measurements and the size of the site. So it's telling us that it's got a 23.9 metre frontage and what the width and depth and all that sort of stuff. So that's always handy information. It's 1,032 square metres. So those split blocks are going to be really good sizes, about 500 metres. Yeah,
it's
nice
almost
big
acreage.
And it just gives you some basic details down here on the house, the existing house, which is now no longer there. It's been removed. But also this little estimate range here on the left-hand side. I mean, we always take this with a bit of grain of salt, but it gives you a really good indication based on the last 6 months of sales in the area of similar properties, what your low, mid, and high price would be for this property. So here it tells us that low would be $597, your mid-range would be $600, and your high price would be $597. Isn't that weird? They've got a lower price for the high. And
does it say how many have sold in that time? Might be the only sale almost.
It doesn't. You'd have to dig a bit deeper to get those details. Yeah, it's just sort of very
looks like
surface
there
level.
hasn't been many sales, which is good.
No. Yes. So the sales history also will tell you what the last sale price was, and we know this obviously because we've been following it. Sold very recently, so it sold for $597, and that was at the end of last year. Well, actually, it was probably more this year. They've owned it for 5 months. So, okay, what else could we find here that's interesting? You can look at the sale history and what real estate agent it was with. You could also look if there was any rental history. Gives you the basic details around the land area and its identification. This little land value history is interesting. It's a value that the council has given the site from a land perspective. So if that house burnt down, then it's telling us based on the rates that they're paying that land is worth $385,000, which is obviously a lot less than what they paid for it. But in reality, it's not always accurate. It's based on council rates that people pay.
Because the state government do a land valuation, and that's what your rate. So if you're a waterfront property, I've got a friend on waterfront, and he's like, oh, I pay like $3,000 or $4,000 a year because his land value is deemed to be much higher than someone out in a rural country that might only be $260,000 of valuation. So if it's got a really high valuation, then expect your rates to be a lot higher as well.
Higher, yes. And that's a good indication of what you're going to be paying with your rates. So you can work that out as well. The zoning they have in Price Finder, I think it is a lot more up to date these days, but I would also be double checking on the council website just to make sure they've got the right information. So they're saying that it's general residential, low density residential, which means that you can only put homes in there. And they've added information around, what school catchment areas it's in. And also, this is really handy, which is what Karen was talking about before, is that any of the council development applications that have gone in, you'll be able to view anything that's within a 2-kilometre radius. So you could go through and have a look at any of those development applications if you were concerned if it was near your property or you wanted to know what they were doing, those sorts of things. So that's really handy to know. And some of this stuff here is probably more statistical than anything else. But yeah, that's just some really good basic information that you can get that we look at. You can also look at an interactive map, which will show you just a couple of photos. It might even show you some photos of the house, shows you there where the split line is. So that's always really good information as well if you've got it. So that's Price Finder. Over to you, Karen.
Thank you. And on Price Finder, similar to what I was saying, I do on realestate.com, I often will do a radius search, sometimes of just 400 meters for that tiny little nook of area.
Yeah.
What things have sold for, to get an idea, because there's, even in places like Ascot, there's a good side, and then there's the not as expensive side. So if you can do a radius search to find out if I'm in the the expensive part or I'm in the other part. So that's a good one you can do, and you can check every other house that's sold in that area or for sale. So you can do all that as well. But sometimes it's just, as you said, you've got to pay for that, but you can get a lot of that information free on realestate.com.
And like how close it is to the train station or to the shopping centres or local parks, all that sort of stuff is really handy, which you can get obviously on Google and even on the council website as well. But that is probably a tool if you're a serious property developer or property finder. That is one of the tools that you would want to be using.
Yeah. And I know there's people out there who say, look, you don't need to, you can buy online, you don't need to view a property, but I can tell you what, standing on the front door of something and having a good 360 view around on what's around you, it's priceless. So that's my tip for it. So. All right. Well, we haven't got any questions today, but thank you for everyone who's online watching us. This will be available later on to watch as well. You can always send us an email. Our email is, our website, join us via zenium.property/join, or you can send us a message on Facebook or through LinkedIn. Hopefully that's given you a couple of little hints for either buying your house or buying a development site, just some free tips that you can have a look at just to make a decision before you actually need to leave the lounge room to go out and have a look at something.
Yes.
So thank you for joining us. Thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome.
This has been
Thanks,
Property
everyone.
for Chicks for the day, and we'll see you all next time. See ya. Bye.
Bye.